Hi everyone, and welcome to our final weekly module, which covers post-Cold War era humanitarianism. As usual, here are our learning objectives. Reading 1 is by political scientist Michael Barnett. This book traces the history of humanitarianism across 3 distinctive ages, starting with the imperial era of humanitarianism from the late 18th century to World War II, continuing with an age of post-colonial humanitarianism from the end of World War II to the end of the Cold War, and finally to an age of liberal humanitarianism from the end of the Cold War to the present. We're especially interested in the post-Cold War era, when the humanitarian field expanded into other adjacent fields, such as post-conflict reconstruction, human rights, development, democracy promotion, and peace building. This expansion reflected a shift in global insecurity. So, whereas during the Cold War, international security implied armed conflicts between states, since then there have been more civil wars, ethnic conflicts, and other forms of domestic strife within states. As a result, the notion of security has expanded to include economic security, environmental security, health security, food security, and terrorism. So, as the global threat landscape has changed, so too has the practice of humanitarianism, the scope of which has broadened to tackle the underlying root causes of social suffering. Reading 2 is by Leila Abu-Lughod, a Palestinian-American anthropologist who begins by situating herself as an Ivy League expert conveniently located in New York, where she was called upon by the media to address a hot topic in the immediate post-9/11 moment. It was right after the invasion of Afghanistan, when then First Lady Laura Bush essentially said that the Americans were liberating the Afghan women from the Taliban. The author was critically suspicious of this apparent obsession with the plight of Muslim women. Indeed, there's been a streak of paternalism in humanitarianism since its imperial origins in the 19th century to today. That's the point of this reading, which is to uncover and unpack the paternalistic tendencies that continue to inform humanitarian discourse and practice. Reading 3 is our final selection from Sam Moyn, whose epilogue not only recaps his argument about the human rights breakthrough, but which also stresses his point that the apparent success of human rights has been due to its pretentious claim of transcending politics, that it supersedes quote-unquote normal political concerns, that it is quote-unquote purely moral, not partisan. Moyn is also critically suspicious of this moralizing pretense, which clashes with the messy politics of the real world. Yet, in doing so, it betrays the very apolitical pretense that it professes to uphold. So, what do you make of this argument? Is human rights a self-contradictory form of non-political politics? Reading 4 is another selection from the Métis scholar Derek Nault. We've already seen how Africa contributed to so-called third-generation rights. In this chapter, the author confronts the charge that the International Criminal Court is targeting Africa. The ICC is a permanent international court that prosecutes individuals for genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes, and the crime of aggression. It began operating in 2002, and of the 46 people indicted by the court, they're all from Africa. As such, the ICC has been accused of being a new form of Western imperialism. Although such criticism is not without merit, Nault shows us that Africans have figured prominently in the ICC's operations. In fact, since its origins, there's been a strong resolve amongst African diplomats in favor of an international court. Moreover, some of the earliest cases covered by the ICC were initiated by self-referrals from African states. In sum, your goal with this reading is to assess the influence that Africans have had upon the ICC. Reading 5 is short but very dense. Written by German historian Stefan Ludwig Hoffmann, it pushes Sam Moyn's thesis a bit further and argues that the breakthrough of human rights occurred not in the 1970s, but in the 90s. And this essay is mostly historiographical, hence its density, but it nevertheless reiterates a key theme this week, namely the quote-unquote ethical turn in international law and global governance during the 1990s. A key milestone in this transformation was the war in Kosovo, from 98 to 99. This was first and foremost a case of humanitarian intervention, and the apparent success of this intervention in particular was linked to the explosive growth of Holocaust memory during that same decade, with none other than Elie Wiesel calling for action in regards to Kosovo. In sum, the goal of this reading is to simply appreciate the historical context of the 1990s as an important turning point in the history of human rights. Finally, we have yet another reading by Michael Barnett, this one co-authored with fellow political scientist Thomas Weiss. This reading is pretty similar to reading 1, so I'd recommend reading one or the other, although with that said, they are complementary. In this piece, the authors identify some of the main goals and principles of humanitarianism, as well as the messy relationship it has with politics, which of course was the point of reading 1. Like reading one as well, the authors stress the plurality of humanitarianism. There's no single, timeless essence to the concept. Finally, this reading elaborates the aforementioned three periods within humanitarianism and stresses the need for a historical perspective for understanding the contemporary tensions within humanitarianism. Okay, and that's it. As usual, we have our discussion forum postings. And additionally, you need to email me your final paper before the end of the week. Contact me with any questions. In any case, thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.